It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the Let Us Dream 2020 Triennial International Virtual Conference on behalf of the entire International Conference Planning and Organizing team. This conference is an outcome of a journey of more than 100 volunteers from different cities, countries, and cultures crossing 3 different continents, Asia, Europe, and North America. Consequently, we're able to provide you with a program consisting of an illustrious group of diverse and talented presenters, all of whom have selflessly given of their time and expertise to bring this conference to you. The first Let Us Dream conference was launched in 2017 at Louisiana Tech University in Ruston, Louisiana, in the United States of America. And at that time, Father Lijo Thomas and a team of dedicated community improvement advocates saw the need to create a forum to connect and share their experiences. That conference was a great success with approximately 200 people in attendance. And since the 2017 conference, annual Let Us Dream conferences have taken place at 5 universities in 3 different countries. We'd like to extend our deepest gratitude to these 5 host universities for supporting, promoting, and participating in this year's conference planning. Also, we want to extend a sincere thank you to the numerous partner organizations who have assisted us in promoting and planning for this conference. Before we begin the day with the opening address, I invite you to join me in observing a moment of silence to connect each other beyond our boundaries and pray for the healing and harmony of the world. The success of that 2017 Let Us Dream conference can be attributed in large part to the president of Louisiana Tech University, who through his leadership, vision, and unwavering support provided the conference with a beautiful venue, as well as multiple resources to help plan, organize, and deliver the conference. As president of Louisiana Tech, he is the chief executive officer of North Louisiana's only Carnegie Foundation National Research University, and one of only 2 public universities from Louisiana recognized in the top tier of the national universities in the U.S. News and World Report. He is a visionary leader, and throughout his career at Louisiana Tech has received many professional, community, regional, and state awards and recognitions. We are excited to have the president of Louisiana Tech University, Dr. Les Geis, deliver the opening address to the Let Us Dream 2020 Triennial International Virtual Conference.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct privilege and honor to welcome you to the Let Us Dream 2020 International Conference. In 2017, my 2 longtime friends and colleagues, Dr. Father Lijo Thomas and Dr. Pauline Leonard, showed exceptional vision and leadership in conceiving and planning this conference. From the beginning, Drs. Thomas and Leonard clearly understood the vital roles that our local communities play in developing the next generation. They understood that community service volunteers and leaders help create opportunities for youth to engage in educational, social, health, and economic activities that are crucial for their development. They understood that our society has created strong models of community engagement where our youth can prosper and achieve great things and have positive impacts on the greater society throughout their lives. They also understood that these models don't exist everywhere, and that there are disparities in engagement, education, health, and well-being, and economic opportunities in so many communities all across the globe. And they recognize the power of collaboration and networking among volunteers, organizers, and leaders across the globe. This power truly changes our world for the better. They had a dream Through connecting these leaders and volunteers, there would be opportunities to learn from each other and to support each other, to have a global positive impact on our future generations. And that significant global impacts could only happen if we connect to each other, learn from each other, and support each other. The themes of this conference were designed to achieve those goals and to let us address more specific topics and explore some of the big questions that prepare us and empower us to impact communities across the globe. Thanks to everyone who has invested their time and energy in organizing this conference, as well as those events that led up to this. I'm grateful for your commitment to be a part of this discussion and to take the things that you learn to go back and have positive impacts in the local communities in your region and in your country. Later today, you'll hear from one of my closest friends and colleagues, President Rick Gallo of Grambling State University. And President Gallo and I are fortunate to live in supportive communities where education is a central focus. Our college communities are less than 5 miles apart, and there are many connections between our institutions. At the same time, there are some significant disparities between our communities and within our communities, even with so many opportunities for education. We know that we must work together, not only to expand educational opportunities, but also to focus on more of the systemic issues that limit opportunities for those in our communities. Thanks again to Dr. Thomas, Dr. Leonard, and all of the other conference organizers. Let's all commit to leave here with new ideas that can impact the communities in our region. And let's commit to work together to make a difference in our communities. Have a great conference.
Today, we have a distinguished keynote speaker addressing the topic of education, educational leadership, and community improvement. He's a prolific researcher, author, and speaker who explores issues and challenges pertaining to leadership and management in higher education, leadership, development of urban school leaders in the context of ethics and social justice, and the key to developing excellent and equitable schools. He also brings with him 20-plus years as a teacher and school and district administrator, as well as 15-plus years in higher education. Along with his research, writing, and leadership accomplishments, he has received several distinguished national and international awards for his work in the areas of educational leadership, social justice, and ethics. We are thrilled to introduce Dr. Anthony H. Namor, Professor Emeritus at California State University, Dominguez Hills, as our opening keynote speaker.
This is Anthony Namor speaking here. I'm all the way from Eastern Canada, although my home is in Los Angeles County. There's all sorts of exciting things going on in the world today, good, bad, and indifferent. And of course, we want to focus on the good today. Let me first start by saying thank you and expressing my deepest gratitude for the committee for extending an invitation for me to be part of this Let Us Dream 2020 Triennial International virtual conference. It's an honor to be here. My topic is going to be on human rights, civil rights, and democracy within the context of educational leadership for globalization. One of the things I've been studying as of late, along with a colleague of mine from Australia, is globalization within the context of globalization. And I thought that I would take a few minutes to just run some of our ideas by this group here today to let you know where we are, where we stand on different competencies in educational leadership from a global and a local perspective. Let me start by first saying how important it is that people be very much aware of taking stands and what taking a stand looks like. For example, history is shaped by those who take a stand and fight for change. We've seen many authors, activists, philanthropists, all different types of people who come from different backgrounds, very diverse, yet very inclusive, on what that looks like. And most significant changes that we've seen have sprung from the most humble beginnings, the minds of some very famous activists. Some of history's biggest shifts in civil rights, human rights, diversity and social justice, community improvement, solution-focused innovation, diplomacy, and lawmaking have been the result of the work of individuals who embodied and fought for the causes that they believe in. And it comes from, as I mentioned earlier, people who represent civil rights, from writers, women's rights, humanitarians. When we talk about civil rights, we're talking about those or people who fought for ending slavery, racial discrimination, and promoting the equal treatment of people in society. Without these elements being put in place, it's nearly impossible to be able to say that, yes, our communities are improving from all facets. And I believe that we do improve our communities when we represent, heed, and really respect what civil rights mean. Women's rights activists as well. These are people specifically working towards promoting equal rights for women. Look at some of our writers, authors who promoted respect for human rights, and they championed the cause of freedom and what that looks like. Then there are humanitarian efforts, people concerned with improving the welfare of others through charitable and humanitarian work. That too becomes very important as we move forward in understanding what it looks like to understand and represent human rights, civil rights, democracy within the context of local and globalization. Within that context of taking a stand, let me just move to global and local efforts and what that looked like, those efforts look like. When we, for example, discuss globalization, we are aware that globalization is grounded in economics. It's extended beyond the economics and is now applied to political and cultural changes that affect, in common ways, large segments of the world's people. So globalization meaning the international aspect, but it goes much further than just international. As opposed to glocalization, which is the synthesis of the local efforts and the global efforts coming together. And that, of course, involves the study of intertwined worldwide discourses, processes, and institutions affecting the local educational practices and policies. And since this particular address will focus on education, I'd like to move into the global leadership literacies within education, and these represent universities, colleges, pre-K-12 education systems, vocational education systems, and the list goes on. But it's education focused. My colleague and I in our research have discovered 10 competencies that we believe are critical for understanding education globally and locally, and especially in terms of educational leadership. And I'm going to discuss those, or at least present them here now. It'll only be brief, but I'll also use some slides as we go through these so you can get a further glance from a perspective, at least being able to see what these things are as well. So let me start with political. So political literacy, and we're calling it literacy and or competency. Both are used. We're going to use them interchangeably, or we have used them interchangeably within our work. We believe that schools can't operate effectively if the leaders within those schools don't understand what it means to be politically literate or politically competent, not just within the local segment, but global segment. The knowledge and understanding of formal and informal political processes and issues, which enables people to perform their roles as citizens effectively. That knowledge and the understanding of those political processes becomes critical for those who are in leadership positions operating in our school systems worldwide, and not just within our own communities. So when we speak of political literacy, we're talking about being literate for the purpose of improving communities locally and globally, as they're both interchangeable, at least connected, and oftentimes we fail to realize what that connection looks like. When we think of politics of global educational leadership, we think of, well, who gets what, when do they get it, and how do they get it? And that what could be in terms of finances, in terms of social capital, in terms of so many different issues, really. Governance, power, the authority in closed and open systems. We believe that continued globalization of educational policy is sure to bring individual preferences, as most things do. It's sure to bring democratic redistribution of authority and individual rights to personal liberty and diversity of opportunity back to the top of the political agenda. That's a brief overview of what the politics would look like, but that then leads into the economic literacy, which is the second one. And economic literacy is the interrelated nature of the global economy and what it is. For example, we have call centers all over the world. We have worldwide crises happening. Macroeconomics and microeconomics as well. And where then, or why should leaders within education be aware of what those macro and microeconomics look like? So the potential for educational issues of economic globalization tells us that it can reduce education to worker preparation. There's a transnational brain drain, gain dynamics that would concentrate an inordinate amount of technical and conceptual expertise in a few affluent centers. Potentially negative impact on human and educational rights due to the extreme inequality with respect to access of quality educational materials and educators as well. So we have the political, the economic, which then brings us to the third competency, which is cultural. So cultural literacy, cultural competency. And we say culture, and when we think of culture, my colleague and I in our research have been operationalizing that as the shared philosophies, the ideologies, the values, the assumptions, beliefs, expectations, attitudes, and norms that knit a community together. And when a community is knitted together, the idea or its purpose is to improve the community and improve the community health and improve the community opportunity as well for those who represent the community and those who are in its extension. The fourth competency is moral competency or moral literacy. When we think of moral literacy, we operationalize that under the jurisdiction of many issues, for example, social justice, ethics, the need for transparency, the good governance, the moral and ethical decision making, and within the moral and ethical decision making, we're also making reference to equity versus equality and what that may mean. A moral literacy approach, for example, to analyzing and interpreting social events, social justice, equity, and equality builds community amity, harmony, and trust among its stakeholders. We believe that positioning the educational leaders to make risky yet very transformational and ethically responsible decisions for the benefit of morally literate communities, nations, and a morally literate world, which is where we are aiming and hoping to be successful with. We then have pedagogical literacy, or again, competency. I'm using them interchangeably, literacy and competency. When it comes to pedagogical literacy, we look at content knowledge and what that looks like. We look at the teaching. What is it that we need? What is the curriculum to look like if we are to make teaching or pedagogy effective within our education systems? What does learning look like? How do we address the different needs of different learners? How do we assess those needs? How do we assess effectively the learning process? And then how do we evaluate? So pedagogical literacy is another element of those competencies or literacies that we believe leaders need, and educators in general need to have knowledge of and be practicing if we're to be successful both locally and globally. We then move to information literacy. Information literacy is the widening of, we have a very widening digital divide. Well, why do we have a widening digital divide? What are the issues that are causing this digital divide, and why is it so wide? From the perspective of education, there are issues of access, knowing why, when, and how to use information and technology. We want our students, our community members, to be thinking critically about information that they provide and that they use. It becomes a very much a lifelong learning process. We also have organizational literacy, and organizational literacy involves the identifying and the influencing of common social and workflow patterns within organizations, in this case within communities as well. What are those socialization? What does socialization mean? Are there different types of socialization patterns that educators and educational leaders need to be made aware of from a local and a global perspective? Well, yes, there are. We have organizational learning systems in place as well. What are the goals and the plannings of organization? Are our students, are our educators equipped well enough from a knowledge perspective and from a practicum perspective to be able to take their organizations and move forward in a very effective manner, both from a local community perspective or local perspective and the global perspective? And within the organizational literacy / competency, how does diversity fit into this realm as well? What does that look like? Is it important? Is it not important? Well, in our current state of affairs, from a local and from a local and or global perspective, yes, diversity becomes very important. There are many opportunities that come with diversity, much like inclusion. It's always been here. We've always had diverse populations and diverse communities. To some degree, diversity, for example, is not just simply racial diversity, gender diversity, but there are so many other issues that come with that, or forms of diversity. We're talking about personality diversity, diversity in motivation, cognitive learning styles, leadership versus followership style, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, politics, linguistic, language, class, age, competency, seniority as well, ageism, organizational function, ability, and philosophy. So we can see that diversity comes in so many different forms, and oftentimes I believe we neglect to realize that there are so many different forms, and we tend to focus on 1, 2, or 3 forms of diversity when there are so many different forms that a globally competent or literate leader would need to be aware of and to be able to identify that within the organizations as well. So the organizational leadership then springs into holistic health leadership. And what does that mean? And we think of the holistic leadership theory, holistic development, fundamental assumptions. We all have fundamental assumptions. And the idea that holistic health leadership is important is simply because we want to, or the purpose behind it is to reunite or understand how we reunite the mind, the body, and the spirit. All 3 elements work well together, and we need to be healthy holistically or within all 3 realms of these particular reuniting elements. So holistic health leadership is a competency as well. Then we have the religious and spiritual literacy. We want to be very careful here not to confuse religiosity with spirituality. For example, we know that religion provides order, it provides continuity and stability. It is not spirituality. The spirituality is the core of what and who we are. And let me just reiterate the religiosity part of the religion. I say we know the purpose of religion as we know it, based on the research, is it provides that order, it provides that continuity and the stability, but it is not spirituality. And people have various assumptions of what religion looks like and how effective it is, just as they do with spirituality. But again, this is a sphere of influence, religious and spiritual competency, that leaders need to understand locally, and globally. If we're to understand, for example, as leaders of education within the school systems, then we want to know what role does religion play within the school systems. How effective is it? And where does the freedom to utilize religious tenets come into play? And the same thing with spirituality. Who are we? What is the core of us? Who am I? And what is my core? That becomes really important for the understanding of spirituality. The 10th and final competency or literacy that we've discovered in our research is known as temporal literacy. Now, this one is pretty scant in what the research says about it, but temporal really focuses on being able to read and understand the history of organizations. I say organizations, but it's really understand the history of just the being. To present, we need to understand what the present looks like, and we need to understand what the future of people and the future of institutions look like. That understanding must come from not just one perspective, but it must come from multiple perspectives. And the only way, the one way, I should say, to understand really what temporal literacy, temporal competency means is by using the data that we currently have to predict and project future trends. So that gives you an idea of the 10 literacies that we have been focused on over the last few years in our own research. This is a big piece of my personal research or professional research. And within those competencies, of course, is the understanding of what special needs as well within our school systems and what that looks like. I was a department chair of a special needs department at the Cal State University system for a couple of years a while back, and very quickly saw the need of understanding how important it is for educational leaders and educators in general to understand cognitive learning processes, developmental, intellectual learning processes, what it means to have special needs in our families, in our communities, what we need to have in place to help us understand the importance of making or taking special needs, or those with special needs, not just children but adults as well, and moving opportunities forward with them. For example, we have many students within our school systems who are who have mild needs, others have moderate needs, and others have severe needs. But we have a lot of administrators in our school systems who simply don't understand what that means or how to recognize what that means. And then once it is recognized by those who do recognize it, what to do with that in order to ensure that equity and equality of all students are there for everybody to take or make use of. We also believe that there are times when we have to mix in with this all of these 10 competencies, we have an opportunity to look at youth activism and what youth activism looks like for improving our communities. What does it mean to have a solution-based innovation and solution-based problems and solution-based questions as well, and ideas within our communities? So I'm going to actually give you or leave with you a youth activism link, which will be put up here on a slide in a couple of minutes, for you to look at what people are doing worldwide along the lines of activism for taking stands, defending human rights, defending civil rights, defending democracy, and ensuring what that looks like for globally competent leaders moving forward. This conference is a precise opportunity for us to look at these ideas and to help others get engaged with being activists or becoming activists in different areas. And I also will leave with you some slides on what some of the areas of improving communities have been and are being right now with regards to solidifying relationships. I'm going to be putting slides up here that are focused on global areas. For example, I have one on Indonesia. We have a slide here. I'm going to show you a slide on the Chinese government being not ready for democracy. That's a question that was being asked. Slide to focus on that in Hong Kong. The USA, for example. Also in the USA, we have many issues right now that are happening that are putting democracy at risk, or at least appears to be, and from my perspective it is putting democracy at risk. We have transgender people demanding respect, transgender people, for example, who are being violated, their rights are violated here. Children in cages, that's also an area here. Black Lives Matter is a movement here. Traditional marriages versus LGBTQ and unions. Reproductive rights of women as well. Pro-choice versus pro-choice versus anti-choice, I guess. Pro-life. So with that said, I think it's important for us to look at these areas that I'm going to leave with you, and hopefully you'll garner a little bit further understanding, a little more understanding of some of the issues that are going on within the world, and why it's important to have leaders running schools, or those in education positions in schools, making it really important to make this a core and a core element of what it is to be an educational leader on a local system level, on a global system level, and on a global system level. So again, I go back and I'll just summarize, for example, what it means for when you bring it all together. So educational leaders, then, from my perspective, is educational leaders are uniquely positioned to influence the aspects of globalization and establish new frontiers. Now, in the future, people with the greatest understanding of the 10 literacies or the 10 competencies that we've just reviewed here, and the will and the skill to influence them will be our organizational and community leaders for human rights, civil rights, social justice, humanitarianism, and democracy. And with that, I hope that if some of you have questions or some comments to make to me on any of these issues, that you'll use my email address to get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you. And you can join us as well as we explore more possibilities here with how we can improve our local communities through understanding the 10 literacies, the 10 competencies from a local, global, and a global perspective. And with that, I say thank you very much.
Coming up, we have 3 parallel panel discussion sessions related to the field of education. In selecting the themes for each of the 3 panels, our team considered current issues and problems that today's educators are facing. The worldwide COVID-19 pandemic has created increased challenges related to online curriculum access, distance education, and the ongoing concern of holistic education in an increasingly digital technological society. We are extremely fortunate to have assembled an international group of education experts representing Canada, India, and the United States for each of these panel discussion themes. Panel 1, Special Education and Online Curriculum Access. Panel 2, Underserved Children and Distance Learning Disparities. Panel 3, Holistic Learning and Psychosocial Development. You will be introduced to each panel moderator and panel members when the 40-minute panel discussion of your choice begins momentarily.
I'm still seeing the host screen, so. Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to Let Us Dream 2020. My name is Dr. Myra Sabir. I am an associate professor at Binghamton University in upstate New York in the United States. And I am very happy to be your moderator for this panel this morning, afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. The title of our panel is Holistic Learning and Psychosocial Development. And we have a panel of two guests, Ms. Shukla Bose, who is the founder and CEO of Parikrama Humanity Foundation in India, and Mr. Samuel Speed, who is the Dean of Student Engagement and Undergraduate Recruitment at Louisiana Tech University in the United States. Our third panelist for unforeseen circumstances is not able to be with us this morning, so you may be expecting to see Dr. Papa Vas, but so there will be the two panelists and myself. So welcome to this panel. So please submit any questions you have on the YouTube site, and at the end of this panel, I will take those questions and pose them to the panelists. Each of the panelists will have about 7.5 minutes to speak, and then we will engage you in conversation. So welcome again. So we'll start with you, Ms. Shukla Bose. Would you mind taking over?
Okay, good evening from Bangalore, India. I'm really very honored to have been invited to speak here amongst this August gathering, and for a topic that is very close to my heart. I believe that education today is in crisis. There are 280 million children that are out of school, do not go to school, and 60 million of them come from India itself. And that's very, very tragic. This COVID-19 has really shaken up the education segment, and 247 million children have not been going to school, and of which 152 million children are girls itself. So the crisis we're talking about are numbers, but there's a deeper crisis, and that is we've actually not approached education the right manner, because education all these years has been a preparation for livelihood, but actually education is for preparation for living. And when you do that, when you understand that, then you begin to look at education in a far more holistic manner and actually look at the psychosocial development of children in schools itself. I started Parikrama Humanity Foundation. This is a nonprofit organization, and we run schools for street and slum children in Bangalore. I began with just one school on a rooftop with 165 children and 11 staff members. And today, in 17 years, we have grown to 4 schools, a junior college, and a teacher training center. Right now, we are addressing 2,000 children that would not have gone to school at all. 1,000 children have graduated from Parikrama and are well placed in fairly high quality jobs and living quality life. And we are training government school teachers. So altogether, we are impacting about 63,000 children. Now, the numbers seem large, and yet they are a drop in the ocean as against the number of children that need to be addressed in India. But I think the reason why we have been able to grow, and I believe we have impact, is that our model has been very, very comprehensive. So we looked at children from the streets and slums. How can we ensure that they do not drop out of education? In government schools where they could have otherwise gone, 67% of them drop out by the time they reach grade 8, and the attendance is only 35%. As compared to that, we have less than 1% dropout and 96% attendance. Why is this different? Is because our approach has been different. We realize a child cannot study well if the child is hungry. So we provide all 3 meals in the school. We take care of the health as well as do a lot of family intervention. This holistic, we call this our holistic model. We call it the circle of life. And we say that if we realize very early that if children come from unstable homes, they will not do well in studies. And we've really done a lot of work with their parents. They're 96% of my fathers are alcoholics. 92% of our children come from homes where there's at least 1 or 2 members in prison. So we're talking about dysfunctionality. And yet from this environment, we have children who are studying law, who are software engineers, who are doctors, who are actually fighting COVID. So this transformation has happened because of our holistic model, where we pay a lot of attention to the psychological, social development of the child.
And 2 minutes left.
So we realize that, for a child to do well in school, they need to feel good. They need to have confidence, high self-esteem. So considering we are a non-profit school and we have to survive with only others' generosity, we have psychologists and 2 psychologists in each of our school, because our children come from very, very traumatic background and they need to feel good about themselves. So only then will they do well. And we take care of our children from E to E, from one end to the other end, from age 5 to age 25, because we realize these children need hand-holding to be able to be placed in environment, in jobs, and prepared for life so that they are able to take the right decisions about their own lives. So holistic development is extremely important for us.
Wow, thank you so much, Ms. Shukla. It was so inspiring. So our next presenter is Mr. Samuel Speed. Mr. Speed, would you like to just begin?
Yes, thank you. But it is definitely my honor to be here, and this is definitely a topic that intrigues me. I've been in higher education now for 28 years. I'm in my 29th year. And so looking at my personal journey, watching the journey of countless young people on the higher education spectrum, it intrigues me just how we learn and that process that we go through. And so as I look and even as I listen to my colleague and I see the disparities, that's where a lot of my attention has been placed. A lot of my research is with African-American males. When you look across the country, here at this institution, African-American males are on the low end of the spectrum when it comes to retention, graduation rates, and just academic excellence. And when I speak to academic excellence, oftentimes we forget access does not equate to success. And so the question we have to begin to ask ourselves is, how can we take these educational opportunities and create those opportunities for life? And it's exactly what my colleague said, it's the circle of life. How can you teach a person to reflect on their true nature, who they are, and bring that out? It gets me back to the root word for education and the fact that it's a drawing out of. I think at some point we've lost our way. And I think it's difficult, and it's one thing for a kid to drop out. It's quite another to stay in and still have dropped out. It reminds me of one of my favorite scholars, Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, who does a lot of work, especially with African-American males. And he talks about the 4th grade syndrome. He talks about this process of going to school, but not really being in school. So it's about engagement. It's about finding the niche for students who oftentimes never find their niche. It's about finding that way to pull them through the processes. So when you look at psychosocial development and you look at the gaps, and as I hear my colleague talk about the homes that some of the kids she's working with come from, and the question we have to ask ourselves as educators is, can we fill in the gap? Can we fill in the gap? Can we shift, and can we holistically shift the paradigm and begin to re-educate not just the children, but re-educate ourselves? Because traditional education does not work for everyone. Once you find the spark, my colleague mentioned some of the students she's working with go on to become engineers. How does that happen? How is it that we study Erickson's 8 stages of psychosocial development, but yet he didn't have a bachelor's degree, but yet taught at a Ivy League school? We have to begin to find that type of brilliance. We have to begin to look at these developmental stages, figure out how we fill in the gap, and how we get to a point where it's not just about the 3 R's, because the 3 R's, they fall short. That's a very myopic and linear approach to education. Education is much more holistic. It involves the total person. I love Dr. Dan Siegel. I'm a neurobiology nerd, so whenever I get a chance, I love reading along those lines. And I love his new 3 R's. He talks about reflection. He talks about relationships. He talks about resilience. These are all skill sets that when we look at our young people and how they grow, and we look at ourselves and how we grow and how we develop, how we mature, and how we have success. These are all things that, although they're not a part of traditional curriculum, they need to become a part of traditional curriculum. When you look at opportunities to get a young person to reset their mindset so that if they are hungry, they know the path to fulfill that need so they can go on to the need of learning and how to begin to develop as young people. I believe it's essential for us to take a step back as educators and re-educate ourselves on a consistent basis. I think the pandemic has taught us that. I think during the pandemic, we oftentimes lose sight of the reality for a lot of people. And so for me to complain because my daughter moved back from college and because everyone's online at one time and the internet is slow, is a little bit of a selfish, myopic view that really does not speak to the totality of what the entire society is going through. And so when you look at education as a whole, and when you look at the opportunities that we have, I believe that stepping back, looking at the big picture, which we've had to do during the pandemic. We just finished our first quarter here at Louisiana Tech, and overall, I think we had a great deal of success. But it forced us. You know, there were a lot of professors who were forced to go to online learning. You know, there are a lot of people who pushed back against that and who have pushed back against that. And now you're forced to do that. Well, how do you create that engagement through those platforms? And so when you look at the gap, the educational gap, and the opportunities we have when it comes to psychosocial development and holistic learning and bringing in the whole child and teaching them that it's, you know, not just about intellectual intelligence, but this emotional intelligence. It's not just about classroom decorum. It's about how that fits into the greater social needs of our society. I think there's just a lot of work that can be done. But as this conference talks about, we need to begin to dream and we need to begin to think and fulfill our responsibility as educators. I learn a lot from young people by showing them an apple and asking them how many seeds does the apple contain. And if that child, you know, says that there's 1 seed in there, or they say that, you know, there may be 12, 13, 14 seeds in that apple, I know that that's an opportunity for me to teach that child that there are an infinite number of seeds in that apple, because apple seeds become apple trees, and apple trees become more apples, and more apples produce more seeds. So I want them to think with a potential that is infinite. potential that goes far beyond what they could ever think. So.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you both so much. We have some very interesting questions, and since our time is short, I'm going to go straight to entertaining questions and then maybe wrap it up a little bit at the end. So one person said that, I think this one is directed to you, Ms. Shukla-Bose. They would love to hear more about the role of psychologists in dealing with the history of domestic violence and trauma faced by the students, especially for different age groups. How do those psychologists engage that?
Okay. I think we do have many students that face a lot of abuse at home. India is a country where there's a still, unfortunately, sadly, discrimination against the girl child. So we have a lot of our girl students who are always compelled to play the secondary role at home, and not given adequate importance and support, even in academically. So we have our psychologists dealing with the critical issues where children have witnessed violence, children have seen their parents commit suicide in front of their eyes, children that we have saved, girls that we have saved from human trafficking, the kind of baggage and residual pain that they carry. So those are some of the really obvious critical issues that needs to be dealt with, and it needs a lot of therapy. And but there are other issues that are not so obvious, but it's the child is not able to express herself. It's then we have to deal with those issues differently, because I feel pain and trauma not expressed is as serious an issue as the more obvious ones. So we have our psychologists doing both one-to-one counseling as well as group therapy. So the group therapy we call a circle time, where and that has worked extremely well, because it's given our children the forum to express themselves, and many a times in a third person way, which they feel safer with in the beginning. So there are many different ways that our psychologists do their interventions.
Okay, thank you so much. So, Mr. Speed, a couple of the questions, I'm going to sort of combine them, get at, you mentioned reflection, relationships, and resilience, and they're suggesting that this online learning environment may limit the possibility for quality relationship between instructor and student. And so they want to know if you think that's the case, if you think that it's being limited by this online environment, and if what's the best we can do.
Yeah, I think it's definitely it provides challenges. Let me start by saying that I don't want to say that it's impossible. I think it provides challenges, and when I say that, obviously relationships are better face to face. But one of the things that I find that when I'm dealing with college age students is as we're having this Zoom call and we're interacting with one another, we have our cameras on. They have the capacity to have their cameras on, but oftentimes we'll turn it off. I think that is one of the ways that they're hiding, and they're just trying not to develop and engage and have those relationships. And so I do think it's difficult. I do think that there are some barriers you have to overcome with the online environment. But I also think you can redirect and maybe point them towards relationships that they do have or that they can have. So oftentimes when we look at the educational system as a whole, too much of it is focused in the school. And although students have homework, students have extracurricular activities that oftentimes they do at the house, the engaging process and the process of actually learning from home is oftentimes missed. And so understanding the dynamics of what's going on and just their personal relationships and how those play into the bigger picture, I think is important. So that's something that maybe the attention can be shifted to. And it may just be simple questions about asking how those family members are so that you can make sure that that child feels like they are connected to you, because you don't have friends without asking, how their kids are, or how their husband or how their wife or significant other is. That's a part of relationship development. So I think you can begin to teach young people through just simple questions and asking. But definitely one of the things is I like to tell students that I'm having to deal with, let's turn your cameras on. If you have access and you can actually utilize a camera on a computer or on your phone or on a tablet, please do so. But it's definitely a challenge. There's no doubt there.
Yes. So I'm gonna ask a question of my own. Ms. Glabose mentioned that the educational system is broken and that we are educated for livelihood versus living, which is a quote. One could repeat that quote. I love that. And the reason we are educated for livelihood really is because we're being prepared to work in, corporate America or the established professions, right? Which, we've taught to orient toward that. And so I'm wondering what either of you would have to say about the role of being oriented toward particular corporate professions and being educated for livelihood, and how we might change that to being educated for living, as you put it.
Yeah. Well, we established our education philosophy where we said, we called it our 5 E's, where we said, our children particularly, knowing the background that they come from, they need exposure. Okay, so they need, and that is a very vital ingredient of education, is opening up all walls and doors rather than making walls, So exposure is very important. Expression is very important. Then we also say empathy is extremely important. We also say, learning how to express one's emotions, critical thinking, to be able to disagree and negotiate. These are important qualities that are vital for living, but also prepares for livelihood. So they are integrated. When I was a student, I learned a lot because I volunteered with Mother Teresa for 7 years. Excuse me. And she would say, and I believe, and I tried to import a bit of that into our education philosophy, where we said, you need to have clarity, you need to have commitment, conviction. Sorry.
It's okay.
Communication, but most importantly, compassion.
Yes. Thank you.
And we think that when you have that, it prepares you for living, but also prepares you for livelihood.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Speed, did you want to say something to that question?
Well, I think my colleague is exactly right. And it reminds me of those other 3 R's, relationships, resilience, and reflection, because I think as I heard her describing their philosophy, they dovetail, they coincide with one another.
Mm-hmm. So one of the persons in the audience wants to know about peer learning in students in psychosocial development in terms of, they're separated by, like now at my university, they're going home for Thanksgiving and they won't be back on campus again. So what about peer learning? How is that? It's a very important part of psychosocial development for young people. So how do you think that is being impacted?
One of the ways I look at peer learning is our current model has classrooms set up where peers are learning from other peers that are in the same category that they're in. I think we need to try to develop models that are a little bit closer to a mentoring model, where students can learn from those who have gone through some of those earlier stages and who have developed. And so I think that's a model that, with proper supervision and even now in the online environment, because I think proper learning requires that you have to become the teacher. And then I think proper teaching requires that you become the student. So it has to be a recursive process. The teacher has to go back to school, and at some point, the student has to become teacher. So one of the ways you can make sure that happens is by putting young people in a position where they can pay it back and they can pay it forward. So they can reach back and help someone who does not have that skill set. And it's, again, not just about the reading, writing, and arithmetic. It could be about reflection, resilience, and relationships. And so that very modeling is something that I think we have failed to really capture in our society. So we have third graders who are acting like third graders because that's what they see. I don't know completely how you change that. I have been able to change it in smaller pockets or smaller settings and in non-traditional spaces. But I think that's one of the key components. And as I spoke earlier about teaching them how to thrive off of relationships, if students who are learning from home have older siblings or younger siblings, just placing in their minds that part of the responsibility is to assure or be assured that those behind them or those in front of them are a part of this learning process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're speaking to Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, right? Right at that space where the person knows a little bit more than you and can help you take that next step. Yes, Dr. Bose, Ms. Bose, would you like to respond to that? The idea of peers?
Yeah, I think peer learning is extremely important. It's very powerful, actually. And I like what Mr. Speed said about students learning best as teachers and teachers learning best as students. I think that's really very, very apt and pertinent. We've tried peer learning in classes because I think it's an extension of our value system of compassion, because we there is varied levels of understanding in a class, which is a very common thing, and we give the responsibility, or we encourage students that have understood something to volunteer to teach someone who has not, because that's again the extension of compassion, and so we try to integrate elements that are essential education tools with our value system, and that seems to be working well. I also agree with Mr. Speed when he says mentoring is also extremely powerful. That is an extension of our education philosophy, where we say exposure. You see, what happens is, especially from children coming from our background, they don't have adequate role models. And you always learn best when you see someone and observe and try and emulate, rather than being told what to do. And so we bring in mentors from outside who kind of does a bit of hand holding of students, as well as our best mentors are our alumni, our students who have broken the glass ceiling, who have managed to do well. We get them to come back to school and mentor other kids. And that has worked extremely well, because they realize that these young adults that come back to mentor them came from the same background. So if they could make that breakthrough, then there's every chance that the students in school can do so as well.
Yes.
Really quickly, I was reminded, and I didn't think about this before, we have a program called the African American Male Initiative here, and it's basically just to place tools in the hands of young men so they can be successful. And I just thought of one of the imperatives, and it's at the end, but it's the most important one. And that imperative is you have to give back. You have to find someone else to pour into. And I like using that model, that you need to find someone who is higher than you on the realm of whatever it is you're trying to do better at. Someone who is with you that can kind of challenge you and kind of compete with you. And then that last component that I'm speaking of now, which is, it's just an imperative. And when I'm dealing with young African-American males in higher education, and because of the gap that we have in retention and graduation, I just don't give them the chance. You have to find someone, whether it's your professional career, whether you're finishing up, whether you're going to the Boys and Girls Club and actually mentoring there, you have to find someone who you can assist and bring along on this journey.
Yes, excellent. So both of you are working with underserved populations. So Ms. Bose, you talked about, the numbers of young people in India. And Mr. Speed, you talked about the men who come into your program. And so, Ms. Bose, you talked about addressing all those basic needs, food, the emotional stuff too, but, just making sure that basic needs are met before they're sort of ready to learn, right? And because there's so many in the underserved populations, my question is, what's the role of government? Because, in terms of providing the resources, because you guys you mentioned, I think I wrote down the number of people, 63,000. That's a lot of people, but it doesn't come close to the number of people needing this kind of holistic attention that you guys are giving. So what's the role of a government, you understand my question?
Yeah, well, especially for a developing and an underdeveloped country, it is expected for the government to play a very significant role, because actually what we need to develop is human capital. And this is, how will a country develop if human resource is wasted because of poor education system or no education system? So yes, it is expected for the government to play a significant role, but and even in India, I tend to get rather cynical, but even in India, the government is doing its best. But here is the issue. In a country like India, where there are about 1.4 billion people, And as I said, about nearly 247 young people going to schools that need attention. The numbers are too many and the progress is too slow. So what I did was I said, one needs to, and in a developing country, an NGO like us is always questioned is how can you scale up? You need to scale. And my response to that is, scaling can also be vertical, in the sense you increase the depth of your intervention, increase the quality to such an extent that every single student that graduates from you becomes a change agent.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the spillover effect is so significant that itself has great impact. Because
Yes.
now we are seeing that my students who have graduated, who are now going to universities, doing well, they have started little schools in the slums that they come from in the evening to to take care of children, to keep them off their streets, and to share what they are learning. So I think they are catalysts of
Yeah.
change.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
don't need to worry about millions of people. If one child is really transformed and in the
Yes.
right way, they will make a change. So there will be many parikramas in a few years' time, not built by me, but my students.
Yeah, there's an argument that that kind of organic change is really the only real kind. Sort of top-down change, it never quite works, but that organic change from the bottom up, it actually has lasting impact. Mr. Speed, would you like to respond?
Sure. I personally think that moving away from government and going to more individual and organizational or group responsibility is possibly a way that could yield greater success. And when I say that, you have a lot of companies now who will allow X number of hours per month that their employees can, through paid opportunities, go and give back to the community. And so when you look at opportunities like that, I think that's much more intriguing to me. Unfortunately, when you look at government and kind of where we are, just having hope in the government is not something that I'm going to sit around and wait for, especially when you look at the disparities between what we're spending on incarceration versus education. And when you're comparing the two, that in and of itself is a tragedy. And so until we move beyond that, I'm not going to wait on that. Now, if they do something, or if they want to increase the funding, for education and the things that we do get, I'm going to be appreciative of, but I'm just not going to wait. I'm going to make sure that I do what I can personally, and then organizationally, I think we need to put processes in place, such as my colleague mentioned. I mean, you have people who go to work, but then in the evenings begin to give and pour of themselves, and taking that time, I think, is what the key component is.
You see, to add to that, Myra, I think what the government gets caught in numbers. People in organizations like us, we get caught in lives. And that's the difference. Every single day in a child's life is very, very important. Every single day wasted in a child's life is a pure waste. We cannot wait for policies to change. We have to be the implementers and do the best we can.
Yes. Okay, so our time is up. Again, I'd like to thank our guests, Ms. Shukla Bose and Mr. Samuel Speed, for coming. I've very much enjoyed this conversation with you, and I'm sure our audience has too. And I also like to thank our audience. Thank you for coming and joining us this morning. And I guess there are a couple of things I would say. There's a focus on the underserved. Maybe the underserved will save us. Maybe they will be the ones who, grow up and take and become government officials who then pay forward these ideas that you're instilling. So I just want to thank you. I think we probably have less than 1 minute, so I don't know that I would ask, further comments, because we might get cut off in the middle, and yet I don't want to sit here and wait for the camera. So, there's another thing. I guess I'll say this: if we get cut off, it'll be me. When we talk about holistic education, I've thought about your panel quite a bit. I was wondering, where are the places where we're connecting people to nature? You never hear that in the traditional educational systems or in the two that you've described. Are there places where people are being connected to nature?
Reflection.
Or maybe we can just think of it, right? It's a great question. Yeah, because when you say holistic, the oneness of it all, right? Another thing I'll say that does not get mentioned, but you're clearly doing, we don't like to talk about, is love and warmth. I can't imagine coming to either of your classrooms or schools and not knowing that the frame, the sort of holding environment there is one that's imbued, with human emotion of kindness and warmth and openness and non-judgment and all of that.
Welcome to our Unsung Heroes celebration. Likely, most will agree that common characteristics of heroes include admirable qualities such as bravery, courage, determination, moral. Welcome to our Unsung Heroes celebration. Likely, most will agree that common characteristics of heroes include admirable qualities such as bravery, courage, determination, moral integrity, selflessness, empathy, and servant leadership, just to name a few. Oftentimes, a hero is admired and recognized for great and brave acts. Literature is replete with examples of many kinds of heroes, such as the mythological Greek hero Hercules, known for his strength and courage, and the non-fictional hero Florence Nightingale, known for her leadership and compassion and care for suffering patients. And who amongst us has not heard of fictional heroes such as Superman and Wonder Woman, both of whom exhibited superhuman strength and strong moral character? Yes, we have many examples of heroes across cultures, but what does that mean to be an unsung hero? As heroes, oftentimes they exhibit moral courage, determination, selflessness, empathy, and servant leadership, qualities similar to those of their more celebrated counterparts. However, unsung heroes typically go undetected in their communities. They fly beneath the radar. Unsung heroes are people who do extraordinary things for others without seeking or anticipating credit, reward, or recognition. The Let Us Dream Conference is grounded in the value of volunteerism, specifically performing selfless acts of service for community improvement and empowerment, or as Archbishop Desmond Tutu would so simply but poignantly say, doing little bits of good. Therefore, it seems highly relevant that we have chosen to honor individuals who reflect this value in their everyday lives without expecting acknowledgement for what they do with their heart. According to the late great American poet Maya Angelou, if you find it in your heart to care for someone else, you will have succeeded. It is this measure of success that is so clearly aligns with the values that underpin this conference. And that is why we are profoundly grateful for the opportunity to have you join us this year in the celebration of our unsung heroes.
Julie Banerjee, and I am a social activist as well as a student currently. So I took up the cause of female feticide in 2004 when my younger sister was born, and I had a personal experience with what people think about females and female feticide. So that's when we started the campaign against female feticide first, and recently, around 2 years ago, I adopted a village. So I took up the cause of female feticide in 2004 when I was just 5 years old. Where I started reciting poems, going on awareness drives, talking to people, and sensitizing the masses. Then 5 years later, in 2009, I took up the cause of climate change, and again, we sensitized the masses and we went on plantation drives. Finally, in 2018, I adopted a village, and 2019, I founded the Sushiksha program along with my sister. I personally encountered how traumatic it can be to give birth to a girl child in a home where you already have one daughter. So when my parents were expecting my younger sister, we saw how society pressurizes the parents to abort the girl child just because she is seen as a burden. So that motivated me to take up the cause, and once my sister was born, fortunately we took up this cause, and together with my parents I started this move. However, it was in 2017-18 when I was studying at the Australian National University that I realized the importance of education and how it can transform a life. Having studied and gained world-class education myself, I realized how young children, the youth, their energies needed to be tapped and they needed to be made aware citizens. So in order to promote civic engagement and to make them more aware socially as well as academically and politically, I started these classes in 2019, and successfully it's been running for over a year now. So regarding the female feticide project, which is titled the Save Daughters, Save India campaign, what keeps me going is basically the results it has created. When we see people who once thought of aborting their girl child and now they've given birth to that girl child and they're very happy and they're educating her, that itself is the satisfaction we require. Besides that, I've seen how individuals can transform their communities and communities in turn their societies, and how this can become a chain of change makers. So just seeing these things keep me going. Besides that, regarding Sushiksha, my free mobile school, absolutely the kids' enthusiasm, the energy, the way every weekend, Saturday and Sunday, they just come rushing to our classes and they don't want to leave, and they request us to continue the classes even during the weekdays, is actually very inspiring, and that's what just motivates me to keep going. So I have always had this intrinsic motivation somewhere that has kept me going, the feeling to make and the inspiration to make a change around me, to become a change agent myself and leave the world as a little better place than I found it to be, and of course seeing the change around. So all of these things, a blend of these things have motivated me.
One of the reasons that I was being motivated to take this program is that when I first of all look at the 17 Sustainable Development Goals as United Nations initiate and has a target for 2030. So I start thinking as an individual, what should I do to contribute to these 17 Sustainable Development Goals that has 169 target, 226 indicators. So after sitting down and thinking of what should I do to contribute individually, so first of all, I look at my community and I look at the challenges we are facing. And what came to my mind, I said, one of the things that can make any community to develop is to have a quality education. So by having zero hunger or no poverty, when people are educated, they have quality education, they have an opportunity to do whatever they can do to make their community develop or out of any poverty or hunger. So when I think of that, actually I graduated in 2014 and I got job in 2016 at Federal Judicial Service Commission, Nigeria. So when I look at it, and I base in capital of Nigeria, which is Abuja. So when I turn back to my community, I say, since I'm working here at Federal Judicial Service Commission, I need to create something that can help my community. So I think of saying, okay, let me just start searching for fully funded scholarships. So when I started it in my office, sometimes if I don't have any work to do, I would just enter Google and search fully funded. So I came across one university called University of Sharjah. It's located in Sharjah, United Arab Emirates, and they offer fully funded undergraduate programs. So I said, okay, that would be, and I know that I have internet connection always that I can make my own research. So I called my community. I asked community. They sent me 10 different names of candidates that has excellent in their secondary school. So I got all their details and everything, and I applied for them for the university. So fortunately, the 3 of them got admission, and it is fully funded. So they have sent me their passports. I process their visa and everything, and the university sent their e-ticket, and they travel to Dubai. So after the first 3 set has gone, I said, wow, that's perfect. So I will be continue doing this kind of things to help my community. So I continue every year. I will contact them to send me some candidates. Then I will fill their form and everything. So if they have gotten their admission and everything, I'll prepare their visa and everything, and they will go. So these are the kind of thing I think that motivated me to say I have to stand for my community, for my country, and for the world entirely. So that's what motivated me to start this program. I will call on everybody that want to initiate this kind of things. It will help a community to become out of poverty or out of ignorance and all this kind of thing. And most of the problem we are facing here in Africa, you will see some violence, some kind of distraction. Is all about people don't have anything to do. But once they are educated, they will get job, and they can initiate program that they can do for themselves. So I'm happy for that I am be able to be doing this kind of things, and I will continue for it always if I can get any opportunity.
Chandrikamma, was born blind, but she has been proving in her whole life that she has a light around her. The main strength that Chandrikamma has is that she has never kept away from doing anything. She couldn't get a government job but started her own business. She is a natural leader who inspires others in her journey. Her role in setting up self-help groups of physically challenged women has been appreciated and recognized in Kerala. She played an essential role in making authorities realize the need to set up select units for Kerala's physically challenged. She has served both as the Joint Secretary and President of the Women's Forum of the Kerala State Federation of the Blind, and Vice President of the Kerala Federation of the Blind. She has set up a home for children affected by cancer. She has been regularly visiting the Regional Cancer Center of Kerala to provide care to many patients. Art can be described as understanding any problems and expressing it through an artist's perspective. With love towards art and with the motive to make people's heart happy, Shirin Batra, founder of Heart, a non-profit organization which is in New Delhi, India, started on the 7th of July 2020, where the artworks are sold entirely for charity. She contributed financial aid to an 11-year-old cancer patient battling leukemia for the third time. Reusable sanitary napkins distribution drive is held in a slum in West Delhi. Awareness of menstrual hygiene and sanitation was spread through a discussion and distribution of reusable sanitary napkins to women and girls living in the slum. She has been initiating this with a dream to touch and to make as many hearts smile as possible. Is the founder and president of NOSA India. National Organization for Consumer Education and Research was established on 15th of March 1992 by a team of 11 people from all over Kerala state. They have traveled across different parts of India and realized that a national level organization was needed to spread awareness among consumers about their duties and rights. NOSA India has innovative ideas to empower the citizens by waking them to the laws of the country in their regional or local language. They have published 72 books and 6 periodicals. They also conduct seminars, classes, street corner meetings, workshops, jeep rallies, youth training, income generating training. Yoshio Tajima works for non-profit organization, Solar, Water and Green Project, which is established in countries worldwide, such as India, Ghana, and Japan. Even economically, poor people can benefit from solar panels and LEDs and safe and clean drinking water and agriculture. They aim to form a society where safe and secure food can be eaten by securing water and spreading organic farming and natural farming. They help to improve rural people's independence and living environment and exchange between cities and rural areas. Regularly, the purpose is to create a society in which people and nature are in harmony by promoting projects, holding practical seminars, practical training, research, lectures, and tours in communities and schools.
Today's closing keynote speaker is a world-renowned women's rights activist and has been involved in her pioneering work since 1991. During that time, she has spearheaded, initiated, and facilitated a host of programs designed to improve the lives of underserved children and women. For example, she was an advocate for helping children living on the streets, and she initiated India's first police civil society child protection helpline. Also, this determined woman spearheaded a 3-year training program for elected women representatives to address and curb human trafficking in their respective constituencies. The boundless list of her involvement in community improvement is impressive, and for which she has received numerous awards and recognition. Moreover, She has authored numerous papers and curricula for the purpose of educating the public on issues pertaining to gender equality, women and children's rights, and transformative leadership and values for women and girls from economically challenged communities. It is with great pleasure that I introduce Ms. Brenda Adije as our closing keynote speaker.
Good evening. Namaskara. For this Let Us Dream conference, it is a privilege to be giving the closing remarks for the first day's program. Education is something that every human being has a right to. Education is also, in my country, India, a fundamental right. Every child, every youth, every adult can claim to want to be educated. Best institutions, quality education at the cost of the government. The challenge and the big question that we are faced with almost on a daily basis at every level, especially among the poor, the marginalized, the vulnerable. Do we really have that quality education extended to these people? No, we don't. The education that is extended to the vulnerable, marginalized, poor is education that cannot be called education. It is literacy, sharing of knowledge, information, some academic matter that is going across to them. Of course, the system needs to be challenged. The system requires to be questioned, because when we speak of education, we need to understand that education is to gain knowledge, gain values, learn about principles and ethics of behavior, of language, of attitudes, to make each one of us better human beings, better individuals. So the question arises, is this what my schools and colleges and educational institutions impart? Today we know that teaching, the pedagogy, is lost. I am taught what somebody else thinks I need to be taught. Not what I want to learn. Not what I am capable of learning. Not what enhances my own talents and potential. Nothing that would make me a better person. In these years that we have been working through several organizations, particularly over the last 15 years, I have been working with Global Concerns India, and we work with children who have left their homes, and we normally have a nomenclature and call them children living on the streets, children dwelling on the pavements, children who might have been trafficked, children who go missing, children who are poor, children who might have got into conflict with law. They are rescued. A lot of work is being done to rehabilitate them. But the question that we need to ask, have we really restored their lives? Because when we talk of rehabilitation, we talk of education, we talk of formal school. What is being imparted at the formal schools or the non-formal schools or the bridge education that some people would call? We from Global Concerns India have been very, very particular that every child, for whatever it is worth, must complete formal schooling as the system is just now. We also realize that though education is a fundamental right of every child, most of these children are unable to afford, their parents and families are unable to afford quality education. And this quality education is expensive in many, many ways. And that is why we work with children who live in slums, sometimes with their families on the pavements, and children who may be rescued from trafficking, child labor, bonded labor. Those who have gone missing have been traced. And then the only first thing that comes to everybody's mind is they must go back to school. Okay. The schools that these families can afford for their children are government or government-aided schools, which are not free. So a little fees is helped with. But we realized that children find it difficult to cope with this scholastic education. Children find it difficult to have not gone to school for 10, 12 years and now suddenly into formal school. So Global Concerns India runs something called Assisted Learning Program. What is this Assisted Learning Program? This is to help the child enrich his or her own potential and talent and be free, be supported, be mentored, helped to dream anything that he or she wants to become, to dream, to visualize and follow that dream without hesitancy, without being afraid. Learn to question. Learn to be able to share his or her point of view and opinion. The assisted learning program is conducted after school hours, inside the school premises. Of course, a lot of permissions and all of that is taken. But we also run these sessions and classes in the slums. We call these programs as creativity sessions, creativity centered. This is for the child to understand what it means to be punctual. Why should you be punctual? Why should you not use bad language? Why foul language must not be encouraged? Why violence must not be encouraged? Domestic violence is something that is so common, it's almost part of the landscape of many of the children's homes. But these sessions are to help them to understand that violence is not the beginning and end to settle scores, to get your viewpoint across, to be able to say that you're right. You can do this through dialogue, to conversation, to debate. And all of that is something that children are encouraged to practice. Reading, poem recitation, participate in drama, in theatre, in singing, in sports. Because often there is this conventional notion that children who come from the slums, children who may have been rescued, may not be able to learn all of this. And going to school itself is such a big boon. So these classes, we have seen over the last 14 years, have helped children to understand so much more about themselves, not feel that where they come from is important at all. It is important for them to understand, to work towards where they are going. And this is what we have learnt and seen, that children who may come from very abusive homes, very violent homes, have made for themselves better lives, have become better persons, have become stronger people who know that their potential can be used to the fullest. Civic responsibility of participating in activities, not just in their schools, but also their homes and their slums. Why you shouldn't waste water? Why should you be conscious about electricity? Why should you be conscious about paper? We see in schools, there is a systematic effort, because when I was younger, we used to keep our textbooks very neatly, very carefully, so that we can give it to students who will be coming into this class the next year. But see what has happened when we talk of capitalism, of commercialism of education. The notebooks that I used this year cannot be used by any other child next year. You have to buy a new set of notebooks. Why? Is the workbook something that could have been separate? Could the workbook be the only one that is bought new by the student next year? The amount of paper being wasted, trees that we cut, the selfishness that I can do whatever I want with these textbooks, throw them. I don't even teach my children, keep your textbooks carefully. Maintain them well, cover them, don't scribble on them, because somebody else is going to use it again. And these are issues that we want to ask ourselves. Why can my system not become more caring? Why can my system not become more understanding? And why should I have different kinds of schools and different kinds of syllabus? We know that universal primary and secondary education cannot be achieved in the absence of safe, enabling learning environments in homes, schools, and communities. And the potential for meaningful learning throughout life for all individuals rests on this strong basic education foundation. Because without this education, adult learning, we are losing out on the essential means to combat poverty, fight all forms of discrimination, or even equip citizens to actively participate in development and governance. The assisted learning program that we hold in the schools and in the slums is to involve parents and children to learn together. Now, of course, that is a challenge, because we are not telling that we are going to sit through sessions and classes and what happened in the class and homework and things like that. But we're talking about values. We're talking about living. We're talking about dialogue and conversation. We're talking about ethical principles. And this empowers the communities to improve their lives and transform their condition. Because there is no fairness when there is no inclusive education. Inequity in education remains a serious challenge. And this inequity is widened in a number of countries, including India. Our experiences show that children with special needs, child laborers, children living on the streets, children trafficked and rescued have no special attention regarding their education or standards that need to be modified or resources that need to be amplified to effectively cater to these children. Not a single school in our country can actually claim that there are teachers who are qualified to attend to the demanding requisites of this exceptionally large section of vulnerable children and youth. In fact, coalitions across India and the world over are crying hoarse to strengthen CSO engagement, yet there are systematic efforts to categorically keep CSOs out of this important consultation, decreasing and shrinking even the little spaces that may be available, because the significance of CSOs and the engagement of CSOs in policy making, in strategic planning, implementation and monitoring is not being regarded as pertinent and important. What we need to ask ourselves today is education able to stand alone? Because you're looking at children, especially those who are vulnerable, which means food security and poverty are cited as major barriers to quality education. And this key factor widens the divide. This key issue makes situations even more abusive for the girls and poor women and young people, because we know that dropout rates are very high in the normal schools that are around across the country. Apart from this, gender disparities persist for everybody, especially those who are differently challenged, who have other kind of disabilities that they have to contend with. Many of the schools, whether they are private or whether they are the government, don't even have ramps for children who are differently abled. To add to this, there is the entire challenge of ethnicity, children who have migrated from other states, language, and these factors have not been looked at across schools. Persons in these situations find it even more difficult to even be part of the regular setup. The government's various commitments to rights of education remain unfulfilled, and whatever NGOs are doing, CSOs are doing, is almost just a drop in the ocean. It is against this backdrop that priority recommendations are being made as most urgent to get back on track to decisively address education as a fundamental aspect for all citizens. Education is essential for promoting peace, human rights, gender equality, cultural sensitivity, and sustainable development. And this is what organizations are trying to do across the world, especially so in India. Having children be participating in different forms of education, not just scholastic education alone, different kinds of education, learning through different forms of education and curricular. We have noticed that children want to participate and question the wrongs that adults are indulging in. And this becomes difficult when teachers are questioned by students. Very often teachers feel that students must not question them. Very often teachers also feel that students coming from the slums, students from poor backgrounds, Dalit students, do not have the right to question the teachers. This is a big challenge for us. At one end of the spectrum, we are talking to children about equality, about fairness. We're talking to children, encouraging them to ask questions. And then when it actually comes to them in school, they are being told, don't talk. What is taught is what you need to go back. Learn, memorize, rote memory, whatever it may be. But we are happy that these assisted learning programs and classes and sessions have made children realize to ask questions, to debate, discuss, and not be afraid to dream. We have children today who are working as chefs. We had one particular girl who has now joined the Chitrakala Parishad. But it was a big challenge for us to take her there because her family in the slum felt that sketching and painting and drawing can't actually be a profession that would actually fetch you money or you will get a good job. With a lot of convincing, a lot of counseling too, this child did her entrance exam and was immediately taken into the college. She has fared very well. She has done very well for herself because it is expensive to study in CKP. Your paintbrushes, your sketches, your pencils, your paper, all of that is something that the parents cannot afford. But we've had generous donors who've come forward through the schooling project, through Global Concerns India. And she is not just one example, we have several other examples. We have children who have got ranks in engineering. We have children who are working in Accenture as leaders. We have children who work as chefs, not in India, somewhere in London. We have several girls who are working with the airlines. And all of this has been possible not just with scholastic education, but with this education that your potential, your hard work, your dreams can be realized. We dream with our eyes open to celebrate life with our spirits, soaring to make it possible for every child, every youth, every woman, every adult to follow those dreams, to live life abundantly, to live life in all its fullness. And I'm very grateful for this conference with the nomenclature, Let Us Dream, with our eyes open and follow these dreams. And let us shout out loud, anybody can dream. Everybody must dream, irrespective of where they are, which family they may be born in, which caste they might belong to, which ethnicity they belong to, what language they speak, what food they eat, or what clothes they wear. And it is important for us to realize that we don't want to teach anybody anything, but we want to walk alongside, sit beside our children and our young people, to be able to learn together, to be able to follow through with those dreams with our eyes open, so that all of us, each one of us, is able to live our life abundantly. Thank you.
It is an honor to have our next speaker provide the closing comments for today. As president of Grambling State University in Grambling, Louisiana, this man is no stranger to the Let Us Dream Conference. He has been an enthusiastic supporter of the locally held conference in Louisiana and, in fact, last year's keynote speaker. He brings with him 30 years of knowledge and experience as a legislator, lawyer, and now leader of the community's #1 historic black college and university. He is as engaging a speaker as he is qualified and has earned recognition for Best Leadership at an HBCU Grow Awards for 2 consecutive years. I'm very pleased to introduce President Richard Gallo to deliver the closing comments.
Hello, I'm Rick Gallo, president at Grambling State University, the place where everybody is somebody. I would like to thank Father Lito and the entire Let Us Dream team for inviting me to say a few words at this year's virtual conference. The world has changed tremendously since we met last year at the Let Us Dream conference at Louisiana Tech in Ruston, Louisiana. I want to applaud the entire Let Us Dream community for your mission and commitment to making this world a better place. Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy of be the change you wish to see in the world has been your motto and guiding principle since your founding. You continue to be true to your mission in a world that needs you more than ever. We are living in the midst of a global pandemic that has forced us to live our lives very differently. The loss of life and other hardships that have resulted from the COVID-19 pandemic have been difficult to comprehend at times. However, there are countless stories of people, organizations, and businesses that have risen to the challenge and have shown us how to navigate our new reality. Solutions on the delivery of food, clothing, healthcare, education, and essential services have been reimagined. It has been inspiring to see the creativity and humanity of neighbors helping neighbors. Whether it's Zoom, Skype, FaceTime, Teams, or another platform, we have adapted to the way we connect with one another online and the way we've learned to mask up and socially distance in person. Life as we know it may be different, but it is also a chance to change the way we see it. Let us continue to find innovative solutions to life's challenges. Let us continue to have the audacity to create in the face of adversity. Let us give ourselves to the work of building a better tomorrow. Let us learn from this moment in our global history. Let us be the change we wish to see in the world today and for generations to come. Thank you again for this opportunity. May God bless and keep you all. Thank you.
We are nearing the end of today's program. However, before we close out the day, allow me to introduce our final delightful and captivating video. It features an ensemble of entertaining and talented musicians performing together from different locations around the world. This inspirational ensemble was coordinated by the Dreams Band. The Dreams Band, an integral component of the Let Us Dream international movement, was established for the purpose of empowering children and youth in various communities in different parts of the world with the help and support of their respective local community musicians. Credit goes to the Dreams Band for facilitating the coordination of an incredible international community of musicians and singers who voluntarily participated in the creation of this video. While this is an international group with likely differing cultural backgrounds, they all subscribe to a belief in the power of music to transform, inspire, and help heal the world, particularly during these challenging times. To that end, they have prepared this musical collaboration expressly for you. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the music.
Holding on to faith when my body's growing weak. I just wanna believe there's someone to seek. Just take a deep breath, watch it all start unfolding. Taking backs, there's no one that will put you first. On and on, goes on and on, like a broken song. Who's gonna save the world? Are you gonna send somebody, an angel or an alien? We're dying every day. Save the world. We're dying every day. Sky is clear, but the streets are all so empty and lonely. I'm so confined. These four walls are all that surrounds me. On and on, it goes on and on, like a broken song. Who's gonna save the world? Are you gonna send somebody, an angel or an alien? We're dying every day. Save the world. We're dying every day. Oh, we'll save the world. Yeah, 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 yeah. We're dying every day. Yeah. Oh, come save the world.
I know that what we wish for simply can't come true unless we make it happen together, me and you. A wish remains a wish, a dream is still a dream, until we take some action and make reality. We are a choir of your children. sun. Before we take possession of this world, we'll ask, would you have us carry the burdens of your past? We do believe you love us, so please do all you can to give us hope that we can breathe and live upon this land. We are a choir of your children, and we will do our best with all the things that we've been given and all the things that we've been left. So let us breathe on this beautiful earth we'll call home when we've grown. So let us breathe in a world with a place for everyone, everyone under the same sun. So let us breathe on this beautiful earth we'll call home when we've grown. So let us breathe in a world with a place for everyone, everyone under the same sun. I know that what we wish for simply can't come true unless we make it happen together, me and you.